Well, hey, everybody. Happy Wednesday. We're doing Mike in the Midwest a day early because obviously tomorrow is Christmas Eve and we have some plans. So we will be out dropping stuff off and doing stuff here at the house and all that good stuff. And figure you'll be busy on Christmas Eve as well with your friends and family. So let's drop our episode for this week on Wednesday, get it out there a day early, and talk Christmas. So we're going to get started here with, I believe it's episode 27 already, and go through some memories. Hope you're having a great Wednesday. Welcome to episode number 27 of Mike in the Midwest, a mini podcast for all of our awesome patrons of the Be Our Guest podcast. Of course, this is Mike Rallman, host of the Be Our Guest podcast. You can check out everything we have to offer over at beourguestpodcast.com. Also, we have a great Facebook page. So if you want to become a fan or just follow that, just go to Be Our Guest Podcast on Facebook, like it, and you get all the information there. And I would love it. I would absolutely love it if you would join me on Twitter. I'm at BRGuestMike over there. Also Instagram, BRGuestMike, so we can talk and share pictures with each other and so forth. And don't forget, I'm going to be using this a lot over the break. We have an awesome Discord server. So if you want to get in on our Discord server, just send me an email, Mike at BRGuestPodcast.com. I will get you the link to that. Also put it here on the Patreon page. So if you need to get in on the it's a live chat. And I think it might be something fun to do as, a lot of us have a slower time at work. Over the next week or so, we could share maybe some of the fun gifts we get during the holidays or, maybe, a shot of your Christmas tree, what have you, before you take it down for the year, stuff like that. It's just a great way to connect with other listeners of the show and other patrons because we do have a Discord server just for you guys. So this is going to be episode 27 of the Mike in the Midwest show. It is recorded on December 23rd, 2020, just so we know when this one came out, if you're listening years and years later. Now, last week, we talked about a website that I heard about on a couple of podcasts that I listened to. As you guys know, and I talk about quite often on the Be Our Guest podcast, I'm just a huge fan of podcasts in general. I do listen to some Disney podcasts. Of course, I've kind of given my backstory over the years. My first podcast I ever found was called Inside the Magic with Ricky Briganti. And the reason I found that podcast way back, I would guess this was in about 2005, was that it was either for my birthday or for Christmas, because my birthday is at Thanksgiving. And so they're kind of close together. But my wife who's the best gift giver in the world. Pam rocks at giving gifts. She got me this iPod, and it was a little iPod. I don't even know if it was called a Nano back then, but it was just the iPod, right? But it was small. And I remember she gave that to me and I was like, this is cool. But here's the thing. I don't tend to listen to music very much because I worked as a DJ for years and years. I played the music at the skating rink. I DJ'd wedding receptions and proms and homecomings and all kinds of dances, private events, Christmas parties. I was always playing music from the time I was like 16 to 24. So I'm kind of musiced out. And so I don't typically listen to music on my runs. I listen to podcasts. I'm more of a talk guy. I like to have my brain stimulated when I'm doing stuff. So I got this iPod. I'm thinking, that's great. I can put 2,000 back at the time. I think like 1,000 or 2,000 songs was what would fit. And it was like mind boggling, right? Because I was coming from a time where, a cassette could hold 16 songs. And all of a sudden you can put every song you own, like 1,000 songs on one device and stick it in your pocket. It was crazy. So I got this iPod and I was like, that's awesome. That's awesome. So I put some music on it. And then I realized I really don't listen to music. I don't, I have to be in the mood. Sometimes I do listen to some 80s. I like some Hall & Oates or some Journey, stuff like that. But I got to thinking about this. I'm like, what am I going to do with this thing? Because I want to use it, right? It's an Apple product. It was very cool. And so I got on iTunes back in the day and I searched Disney. And I guess I was looking for music, but then I found something called podcasts. And basically they were like talk radio for Disney fans. Well, you guys know that. So I found that. And then eventually I found WDW Today. And that became my jam because they came out 3 days a week, Monday, Wednesday, Friday. Sound familiar? And they had a panel discussion. sound familiar. And the thing was, is when I first started listening to WDW Today, I didn't know how any of this podcasting stuff worked. And I kept telling myself, I'm like, what are the chances that four guys that are huge Disney fans, and also not just Disney fans, they're knowledgeable Disney fans, like they know their stuff. They're experts at this stuff. When they talk about it, they talk from a knowledge-based approach. I'm like, what are the chances these four people would all be in the same town and they can get together 3 times a week in a studio and talk about this stuff? Back then I had no idea about Skype and how these people were actually all in 4 different locations. They use Skype to connect and talk. Again, this was in those early days, like 2006, 2005. And so I was enthralled with it. I was like, this is crazy. I've always grown up listening to talk radio in St. Louis. We have a big AM station called KMOX 1120, carries the Cardinals, carried the football Cardinals back in the day, but they have lots of great like late night call-in talk shows and stuff like that. And it's called the Voice of St. Louis, and it truly is. So I grew up listening to talk radio, and now I could download these podcasts in my computer. And back then what I would do is when I got up in the morning, I would take my little iPod, I'd plug it into the computer when I got into the shower in the morning, and everything would sync up. And then after my shower, I would grab it and then take it off to work. And I would listen to it on the way to work, or on the way home, or on my playing period as I was grading papers. And it was just the greatest thing because, you know, I listened to Ricky Brigani. He's very professionally, Inside the Magic was very slick. It had nice transitions. It was very well edited and so forth. WDW Today was 4 guys that were Disney fans. You could tell they were friends, right? They were friends first. They were podcasters second, but they were good at what they did. The shows were short. They were fun. And the thing was, after about 6 months, I felt like I knew these guys, right? I knew Matt's personality. He read things quickly. You know, he had his likes. He loved the studios. He had things he didn't like. You know, Scopo was kind of the wise old genius that people would go, you know, up the mountain to get some information from. Len was a genius, right? He was the Mensa guy that thought of things way outside the box and saw things in a slightly sarcastic way, but also, you know, he was just, he was so smart that he saw things that the rest of us didn't. And he was very creative in his thought process. And then of course you have Mike Newell, who, you know, when he spoke, it was very important, but he didn't speak a lot. So when you got to hear from Mike, it was really cool because again, he was kind of there, always kind of there in the shadows, putting everything together. And I know he produced the show, so it was kind of fun to hear his perspective on things when he did speak up. But I knew that without Mike, you know, the show wouldn't be exactly what it was. And I really appreciated that he was the producer. He was the one that kind of kept everything in line. He was kind of like the ringmaster, and he did a great job too. So, you know, I think that's a great thing about podcasting. I'm getting way off on a tangent, but that was what kind of got me into podcasting and made me want to give it a shot, you know, back in 2007, and we started in 2008. So this journey's been going on, you know, it'll be 13 years for us continuously. Once we get to March, and I've said all that because I wanted to thank each and every one of you, because without your patronage here in 2020, I don't know that this show would have seen 20 or 13 years come March. You know, during the summer and even into the fall, and, you know, things aren't back to normal, don't get me wrong, but at least things look like they're going in the right direction. Without you all, each one of you who's listening to this show, because you have to be a patron to get it, your financial support means more than I can say here on the show. You know, as we get to the end of the year, I just want to let you know that you are appreciated. I thank you so much. I know it is a hardship to support the show in a way like this, but I always want to give you at least 3, 4, 5 shows a week, so that you have somebody that, you know, if you are having a rough time, or if you just need somebody to be in your ears, you're cutting the grass or shoveling the snow, or, you know, cleaning out the gutters, or, you know, just, you know, sitting around the house, or going on a long run. Maybe you got to run 20 miles today. I hope that we've shared some laughs. We've shared some memories, and we've shared some knowledge to help us have better trips. But thank you for being a supporter here. Thank you is not enough, but I just want you to know that it is absolutely appreciated, and it was needed, and it continues to really help us kind of keep things moving forward. So thank you so much for that. Now, today's show, and again, I don't even remember where I started on that iPod story, but today's show is going to be about Santa was here, right? Because is we're recording this on December 23rd. Santa's up at the North Pole right now, getting his sled ready. I bet you Rudolph and the rest of the reindeer right now are really munching down on the reindeer chow, because I mean they got a big night tomorrow night. They're, as I'm sitting here, they got about 36 hours until they gotta, face into the wind and take off and bring all those toys to all the good girls and boys all around the world. In one night, they have to hit the whole world and deliver all those presents. So it's probably a crazy time right now in the North Pole. I wish I could see it, because I know Santa's probably a little nervous, right? He's like, we got to get all this done. We got to get everything packed. We got to get the sled ready. We got to, oil the skids. But I wanted to talk about when I was a kid, kind of my thoughts of the whole Christmas and Christmas Eve process from my perspective. All right, so let's kind of go through this. Now, again, I grew up in Florissant, Missouri, which was a suburb of St. Louis. It's a suburb of about 50,000 people, so it's a larger suburb, about 10 miles north of downtown St. Louis, and it was a very middle class area. We had, a lot of blue collar workers in my neighborhood. We also had some folks that worked at McDonnell Douglas. McDonnell Douglas was actually right on the border of Florissant. So we had a lot of folks that built airplanes for Boeing or not Boeing. Well, I mean, it is Boeing now. Boeing bought McDonnell Douglas, but they built basically a lot of commercial jets. They built a lot of the fighter jets. And so a lot of folks were tied into McDonnell Douglas and Boeing now. So we had, a nice community. It was a great middle of the road, middle class place to grow up. So of course, Christmas would start for us right around, and my friends, it would start for us like right around Thanksgiving, right? You start to get ready for Thanksgiving. I went to a public school until second grade, then second to sixth grade, I went to a private Christian school. And so you would, right before Thanksgiving. Now, again, I know we're not doing this anymore, but this is just a sign of the times in the early 80s, was that, we learned about the Pilgrims. We learned about the Native Americans. And I remember in kindergarten, we made little like vests out of those paper grocery bags, and you cut your armholes out of them. We decorated them in the front and the back. We colored them. We had headdresses on. Some of us were Native Americans, some of us were Pilgrims, and we all sat around a table. And I think we ate like popcorn and maybe like candy corn. Maybe I ate candy corn. I have no idea. We had a big, long table, and it was, we were reenacting what was back then considered the first Thanksgiving. And so we learned that. So we got all the Thanksgiving stuff. But then as soon as we went out on break, we had that Thanksgiving break. That was the cue in my house. And we still carry on this tradition, that's when we put up the Christmas tree. Now, as I think back on the Christmas tree from my childhood, and I think all of us kind of go back here, right? Because as cool as our Christmas trees are as adults now in our homes, I think we long for that Christmas tree, no matter how beautiful, how ugly, how normal, how extravagant it was. I think all of us, or maybe it's just me because I have a huge nostalgic bone in me, but I think that we all kind of want to go back to that time when we were 5, when we were 7, and kind of, be able to just walk through that living room again and, just take it all in. Like, what was the wallpaper like? What was the tree like? What was, what did we have hanging on the front door? So I'm going to talk about that for a second. So when I was a kid, we had like I've talked about this a couple times, we always had an artificial tree because apparently I was allergic to real trees. And we had the same artificial tree every year. And I remember it was stored in the laundry room downstairs all year under one of these shelving units. And, you didn't really mess with it until, right at Thanksgiving. My parents would pull it out. They would put it up. In our Christmas tree, the couple things I remember about ours, it was average size. I guess it was like 6 foot tall. It wasn't huge, but it was gorgeous. It was so gorgeous. So now I know a lot of people have different philosophies on what Christmas trees have to have and what they don't have to have. For example, with our Christmas tree in our house currently, since I met my wife, she loves white, clear, small lights on the Christmas tree. She loves white, clear lights. Now, if you look in the shot of my videos when we do the podcast, I have the downstairs kind of ugly, fun Christmas tree, and it's got flashing colored lights. That's what I like. I like flashing colored. She likes plain white because it looks beautiful, and I get it. So Our Christmas tree is right now currently in our living room has over 1,000 non-LED lights. This thing gives off heat like a fireplace, and it's gorgeous. But when I was a kid, our Christmas tree had these small but colored lights, and they weren't just the light bulbs. They had little plastic around each one of the light bulbs. It kind of looked like a flower bloom. They, I'll try to find a picture. I think I retweeted it the other day. I found some, but it almost looked like the light had a little half circle around the outside, and it almost looked like it was the petals for a flower. They were gorgeous. So we had those on our Christmas tree. And another thing that we had when I was a kid that we don't do on our Christmas tree is here at our house was that we had garland. And so we had silver garland that would drape in and out of all the branches up and down. And it just, when the lights hit that silver garland, it was just beautiful. Now, also on that tree, we just had a potpourri of ornaments that we collected over the years. You know, some that we made. I remember back in the day, these things called shrinky dinks were a huge, big deal. You had shrinky dinks with all kind of like my sister did strawberry shortcakes. We had Smurfs, but you would just color in this thing on this like clear, kind of opaque piece of plastic. You put them on a baking sheet, put them in the oven. They would shrink down real small, but they would bake in the colors and they would become Christmas ornaments. We had a lot of shrinky dinks. We had, just stuff we made, some of those balls you buy at the store, the glass balls and so forth on the tree. I mean, it was just gorgeous. But here's the thing. So once the tree was up, right, that became the light source at night while you were watching TV, whether it was Dukes of Hazzard or Fantasy Island or the Love Boat or whatever on a night. We would turn out the lights in the living room and the Christmas tree would illuminate the living room. That was always magical. That meant it was like a magical season because I just love the glow of the Christmas tree. Now, along those lines, my dad, on the time we'd put up the Christmas tree right after Thanksgiving, he would put up the Christmas lights outside. Now, we didn't have a big house. We had a really small house, less than 1,000 square feet. And we had just basically like one straight gutter across the front of the house. It wasn't, it was just a little bitty ranch, a little bitty starter home, little ranch, and just one gutter that went across the front of the house. So my dad would hang the Christmas lights on the front of the house. But now that I think about it, okay, so when we hang our Christmas lights, we use these like plastic hooks that hook onto the gutter, and then the lights go into the other end of the hook. My dad used a big old staple gun, as I recall. I do remember this. He had a big staple gun. He'd be like, ka-chee, ka-chee, and he put those things in every year. I'm not doing that to my house. I don't know why he did that, but he did. Anyway, our lights growing up, because I know nowadays you have a bajillion kinds of lights, right? You have icicle lights. You have these lights that are LEDs that do all the cool stuff and dance to the music. Nope. Back in the 80s and late 70s, they were just big colored bulbs that were very, very opaque. They were not clear. They were not translucent. They were opaque. You couldn't see the filament inside the bulb, and they got hot. I mean, this is probably why we don't have them anymore, right? But he would hang those on the gutter. And the thing is that first night that I went to bed after the Christmas lights were up, it was like, again, it was magical because I remember laying in my bedroom in just like looking out my window, and I would see the Christmas lights kind of giving a glow to my window, blue, red, green, orange. And here's another thing about our Christmas lights. And my grandparents had the same ones, is that they started out like in a pattern of colors, you had like a pattern that repeated. But back in the day when a light burned out, you just grabbed another bulb and threw it in there. So after a few years, there was really no pattern to the Christmas lights. Now, my wife would have never, ever stood for that. She's got to have symmetry. She's got to have order. And these were not order, but they were beautiful. And so on our house right now, if you come by our house here in St. Peters, Missouri, we have the big bulbs, but we can't find the big opaque ones that get hot because they probably don't make them anymore. But they're translucent. You can see the filament. They're LED lights. They're not as bright. They're close, but they're not the same thing. But yeah, those opaque lights. So I wonder if you had something like, did your tree have garland? Did you do shrinky dinks? Did you have these kind of lights on your Christmas tree? Let me know in the comments below. Also, another thing is that every year on our front door, and this is going to be kind of hard to describe too, we had a couple actually on the front door, like on the other places on the front of the house or in the windows. We had these things. One was Santa Claus, And what it's hard to describe. It was almost like melted plastic. These little pieces of plastic, all kind of like a mosaic, like kind of melted together. And it looked like sand. It really looked nice once you got way far away from it. But when you were up close, you could see it was just like maybe 3, 4, 500 little pieces of plastic all melted together and had a really cool texture to it. And we had one of those with Santa. We had one with Frosty the Snowman. I think we even had one for Rudolph. And we put those in the windows, on the front door, and so forth. And I remember when those came out, it was time. Okay, a couple other things I want to remind you about, and then we'll talk about the morning Santa would be there. So another thing that we had when I was a kid, now my dad had this, and I have it now. So when my dad was a kid, and I'm talking, my dad was born in 53, and he's got an older brother who was born in 50. So, and I've heard this story many times about my grandpa, who is my hero, my grandpa Rallman. He was a construction worker, as my dad was. And so he worked a lot in the spring, summer, and fall. But in the wintertime, he was a cement mason. So once it got cold, you couldn't pour concrete. So the winters were kind of thin for my family growing up, because my dad was a cement mason, and you don't pour concrete in the wintertime when it gets below freezing. So when you don't pour concrete, you don't work, you don't get paid. But he worked a lot all the rest of the year, so it kind of balanced out if you saved up. Now, so when my dad and his brother were kids, I'm talking really young kids, my grandpa surprised them. And again, I've just heard this story through the family. One year with this gigantic Lionel train display. Like he's out in the garage. He didn't let him see it. He built it on his own, like a big board. He put like the fake grass down. He got I think he had 2 or 3 different tracks with like switches. He had the Lionel train sets. He had the little car that would drop the logs. He had a church. He had the railroad crossing that would go up and down as the trains went by. There was one where a conductor came out and waved. I mean, this thing was amazing. Now, when I was a kid, he still had some of the train stuff left. And my grandpa would put a train out, that same Lionel train, which I now have. I have the train. Now, of course, it's not in great shape. I have all the cars. I have the track. I even have the transformer. I just got to get it running. I don't know how to do this, but that's one of my projects. One of these days, I'm going to get that Lionel train set running. I even have some of the props and stuff. Now, of course, they're not in great shape, but my goal, because I loved my grandpa, is to refurbish that Lionel train set and have that under my tree someday. But getting back to my memories when I was a kid, I had a train set. Now, it wasn't the same scale as my dad's and my grandpa's, right? That was a Lionel train set. It was big. It had like big track with 3 bars on it, for the tracks. I had the smaller trains. If you remember, I think mine was called the Santa Fe, and it had like 6 or 7 cars. One of the cars I remember to this day was a Ralston Purina checkerboard car, because back in the day we had the arena, which was where the St. Louis Blues played, and it was called the Checkerdome. And it was sponsored by Purina, because that was a St. Louis company. Now it's Nestle. But yeah, it was like red and white checks and a blue car roof on the car. It was awesome. But I did have a small train. You could really, the only thing you do was like speed it up, slow it down, or reverse. That was it. But God, I played with that train so much. I loved it. So anyway, let's talk Christmas Eve real quick, because I'm already getting long and I know you got things to do. So you would go to bed on Christmas Eve after you went to church for the candlelight service. We went to my grandparents before that, opened our gifts from our grandparents. Got to see my cousins, but we came back late and we would get into bed. And of course, the Christmas lights would be kind of glowing in my window. I was always like, oh, Santa's coming tonight, right? I'm so excited. I can't sleep. And no kidding. One year I thought I heard Rudolph on the roof. In the reindeer. I probably did. I know I heard somebody on the roof. I'm sure it was the big man and the reindeer, but I didn't get to see them because, of course, I couldn't look on the roof of my bedroom because it's above me, but I know they were there. So you would, kind of wait out in your bedroom. You'd be nervous. You'd be thinking about what you're going to get. And then, boom, all of a sudden you'd wake up. It's Christmas morning. And the thing is, so I only had a little 1-story house. Didn't have to go down any steps. We didn't have a fireplace. So Santa just came in the front door. But like you would kind of crawl out of your bed, and it's super early, so everybody else is still sleeping. And you would just kind of, because I had to go through the kitchen to get to the living room, walk through the kitchen, And then that very first peek around the corner, you were just praying that you would see something under the tree. And you would look, and there it was. There were gifts under the tree all over the place, some for myself, some for my sister. And it was amazing. Like, it was just unbelievable. Santa came during the night and left some of the gifts I was just praying for and hoping for when I talked to him at Jamestown Mall. And what, just real quick, a couple of the gifts I remember getting that it just blew me away was one year. I do remember going around the corner. And I mean, this would be like winning a car as an adult. I went around the corner, and in the middle of our living room, right next to the Christmas tree, was a Huffy BMX bicycle. Now, this wasn't just a regular old bicycle. This was a Huffy bicycle. It was yellow. No, it was blue, but it had yellow mag wheels. It didn't have spokes. It had the mags, the plastic mags. It had blue tires. It had the number plate on the front of the bike. It had the pads all over. I think it even had pegs. It was the most magical thing ever. I couldn't stand it. Santa was too good to me to bring me a bike that year. And the thing was, that year the snow was on really, really deep for some reason in St. Louis. Like, we had a lot of snow that year at Christmas. It didn't matter because my buddy across the street, Ryan, he got a bike too. Santa must have been like getting deals on bikes that year. The elves were really good at making them. So, once we got to open our presents and all that stuff, I called Ryan. He's like, yeah, I got a bike. It's me too. We were out there riding our bikes in the snow, having a great old we did not care. We had the best time. It was probably freezing. We were having a good time. So I hope, maybe somebody has that kind of a memory this year. Also, 2 more gifts. One of the year, I got a slot racing set. Now, some people might not know what a slot racing set even is. It's kind of like a train. So you got these cars. They're little race cars, or you could have all kinds of little vehicles, but they have little pegs on them. You drop them down onto the track, and they run on electricity. So you have this little trigger, and the harder you squeeze the trigger, the faster the car goes. In this track, I remember it was all set up. Santa didn't just drop off the box. No. Santa set up the track in the middle of the living room. He took the time. In this track, I don't know if you ever saw this, if you're my age, in a catalog somewhere, this track not only drove around, but it actually went up the wall. It went up the wall and down the wall. It was crazy. And we got to do that immediately because it was already set up in the living room. Got to play, and I couldn't believe it. I had a slot racing track. Final gift I want to talk about one more. This was when I was in about 4th or 5th grade. This was something I had wanted for a long time, and it really, truly did change my life. So when I was in about 3rd or 4th grade, I became really good friends with a kid at school named Jeremy Steffens. I have no idea what Jeremy's doing. I haven't talked to him since elementary school, but I remember we became good friends. And I went over to his house one day when we both went to North County Christian School, and I hung out with him for a while. And I remember this was in 84 because the Olympics were going on in Los Angeles. And so I remember going over to his house, and the thing was, he showed me this thing that I had never, like, when you're a kid, right? This is one of the memories I think everybody has. When you're a kid and you go to a friend's house, you're always so enthralled with the toys they have that you don't have. Even if they're not that better than what you have, they're different and they're just so cool. So I had an Atari 2600. When I went over to Jeremy's house, he had a Commodore 64 and he had all these games. He had some on cartridges. He had some on cassettes. He didn't have a disc drive, but he had cassettes and cartridges, and we played all these games. They're awesome. One of the games that we played was called Summer Games, and it was unbelievable. It was like the Olympics. And so, so badly, I wanted a Commodore 64 so I could play games, just because the thing was, I had an Atari 2600, but he had way more games than I did, and his games were all better. And this thing played music. It had just great sound. It had a SID chip. And so I remember asking my parents, and again, looking back, my dad was a gadget geek just like I am. I mean, we're so much alike, but of course you don't see it when you're a kid. But the funny thing is that next Christmas, that's right, I had a Commodore 64 under the tree, and I almost had a heart attack. I saw the box. It was not set up, obviously. I just saw the box under the tree, and I knew what it was, and I knew what I could do with it. And it really did change my life. So in a future episode of the Mike in the Midwest show here, I'm going to tell you about that Commodore 64 and what I did with that Commodore 64 and how it has led even to today to the VR Guest podcast. So I hope that today I've brought you some kind of memories of what it felt like to be a kid on Christmas Eve and that whole Christmas season. But as we get out of here, I just want to wish each and every one of you a very Merry Christmas. Happy Kwanzaa. I hope you had a great Hanukkah if you celebrate that, whatever you celebrate. I just hope that it is the best for you and all those around you. We all deserve a great celebration at the end of 2020. Again, I am just absolutely so grateful to each and every one of you for helping out with the show. We couldn't do this without you. Please let me know. I thank you so much for that. So get out with your friends and family, enjoy the last, couple days here of Christmas season, and then relax until the new year and just really take it all in. But for us here, Mike in the Midwest, I hope you've enjoyed today's show. I hope Santa's getting ready to fly, and he is so absolutely good to you and your friends and family this year. So stay safe, stay healthy, and Merry Christmas.